Open hardware again. We're at Vision on TV interviewing people at OrgCon. So we have an interesting man here. He tells me he's a lawyer. He hasn't been strung up and strangled yet, as most lawyers were in the Peasants' Revolt. Let's see what he has to say about open hardware.
Well, I was supposed to be going incognito today, but unfortunately my cover has been blown, so yes, that's correct, I am a lawyer. I've just come out of the open hardware talk with Alison Powell, who is my sort of co-presenter for the previous talk. I may be being very stupid here. I have a horrible feeling that what I'm trying to do is make myself redundant. Talking about open hardware, there seems to be a sort of degree of expectation that open hardware is something that can have copyleft attached to it. So, in other words, it's possible to try to keep sort of open hardware under the same sort of control as open software.
Because it just seems self-evident that the same licenses should apply, but legally they don't. I'm just still, explain why they don't apply the same licenses.
Well, copyright is something that applies very often if you're using software. So, for example, every time you need to run a software program, every time you distribute it to somebody else, every time you make that available to the public, copyright applies. And copyright is something that can be controlled by a license. So the original GPL license that people will be very familiar with takes advantage of this, and in the life cycle of a piece of GPL software, that license will come into effect thousands and thousands of times. Hardware is not the same. If I make a hardware article and I physically pass that over to you, an IP license becomes irrelevant, so it makes it much more difficult to apply the sort of rules that made free software work.
So can you give us an example of a license? Do you have a license?
Well, I took the very sort of simple by way of a parallel. The Apache Foundation has a license, Apache 2.0, which is very well known in the world of open source software, and it doesn't try to impinge on users further down the line in terms of making all the design documentation, the source code available. So it occurred to me that it'd be actually very easy to turn that into a hardware license. So that's what I've done, and if you have a look on www.solderpad.com, you'll see the amendments that I've made to the Apache license to make this work. I'm not saying there's anything magical about doing that. They're very simple amendments, but it shows that if you have a very straightforward license like that, it really, a lot of these problems, they don't disappear, but they're moved into a different domain, and I'm not sure that the legal domain is the right place to try to deal with them.
So copyright deals with digital stuff. Physical stuff, what law are you using to enforce the license?
Well, it doesn't need enforcing. That's the great thing. It basically lets you do anything that you want. There are some sort of very minor conditions that mean that you have to sort of retain attribution, and you have to retain exclusions of liability, and so on and so forth. But it takes a realistic view that copyleft isn't going to apply, so that somebody can take the design and then they can incorporate it into a physical object, and it may turn up, in your favourite brand of motor car at some point in the future. Fine, if that happens, that's okay. But if you talk to free software people, they tend to be talking about, this free rider problem. If you speak to Apache type people, they say the free rider problem. As far as they're concerned, it's not a problem. They want as many people to use their design as possible. Ideally, they'd like it to be an open design, but if people choose to close it, that's fine, because they will eventually figure out the error of their ways and realise that there is a benefit to joining some form of community.
Okay, so briefly again, if people want to find out more information, what website can they go to?
Well, if you want to look at the license, www.solderpad.com is the place to go, and there's also lots of other great stuff on there about electronic designs.
Fantastic. So, Vision on TV, it's interesting to look at this new world of, because we all understand Creative Commons and copyleft, but physical objects are being opened up. Hamish Campbell reporting.